Welcome to America, everyone. Sober Oni of G&A Reviews here with a servant spotlight for the king of manservice himself, Jalter. We'll be examining his stats and skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize them effectively, and an overall grade comparing him to how he stacks up to the other 5-star servants. I also have spotlights out for the other America story servants up as well on the channel, so do check those out right after this. But for now, let's move on to Jalter's stats. Ku has a max HP of 12,210, which is below average for a 5-star berserker and very low overall, with even some 4 stars having more HP. But his attack of 12,805 more than makes up for it, giving him the highest attack among all berserkers, surpassing even Kintoki, and the second highest attack in the game overall. Taking a look at his skills, his first skill is Frenzy of Spirits, rank A. It decreases the critical hit rate of all enemies for 3 turns between 30 to 50% and decreases their attack for 3 turns between 10 to 20%, both depending on level. His second skill is Protection from Arrows, rank C, which applies evade for 2 times and increases his defense for 3 turns between 7 to 14% depending on level. And finally, his last skill is Battle Continuation, rank A, which applies Guts 1 time for 5 turns, reviving him with between 1,000 and 2,500 HP depending on level. Moving on to his passives, Jalter has Madness Enhancement, rank EX, which is equivalent to rank C, increasing his Buster Card effectiveness by 6%. He also has Divinity, rank C, which applies damage plus 150. Moving on to his deck and Noble Phantasm, Ku has a full Berserker Buster deck with Quick, Arts, Buster, 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 and a Buster Noble Phantasm. Ku's Noble Phantasm is Kurido Chulainn, which increases his attack for 1 turn between 30 to 70% and increases his defense for 1 turn between 30 to 70%, both depending on overcharge, and it deals significant damage to a single enemy with between a 600 and 1000% damage modifier. Taking a closer look at his cards, we see that his Quick card hits 4 times, his Arts hits 3 times, his Buster hits 3 times, and his extra attack hits 5 times. He has a Noble Phantasm gain rate of 0.69% and a star rate of 5.10%. This means he has above average Noble Phantasm gain and star generating for a Berserker due to the high hit counts on his cards, especially his extra attack, although he does still have very poor Noble Phantasm gain overall. Jalter is Ku, but as a 5-star Berserker, and I really can just end the spotlight right there because you should all know how amazingly OP that combination can be. But let's have some fun dissecting it anyway. Starting with his skills, they're incredibly good and they should be very familiar. 2 of them are basically ripped right from Lancer Ku, albeit with a slight twist. Protection from Arrows is Jalter's best defensive skill and one of the best evades in the game. Note that this evade lasts for 2 hits, not 1 turn, meaning that it'll last until Ku takes 2 hits of damage. At max rank, this skill is going to have a 5-turn cooldown, very short considering that in most cases it's going to last at least 2 or 3 turns. And if you pair Jalter with an ally who has a taunt, you can easily abuse this skill. You also get a nice 14% defense buff for 3 turns, which isn't amazing on its own, but considering you'll likely be pairing Ku with supports, this can be a nice extra boost to any defensive buffing skills that they give you. Really, the only negative thing to say about this skill is that it's not as good as Lancer Ku's, since it only evades 2 times instead of 3 times, but you can't have everything. And should your evade be down at any point, Jalter also has Battle Continuation on a pretty reasonable 7-turn cooldown. This combo of Protection from Arrows and Battle Continuation gives Alter Ku remarkable survivability for a Berserker, almost on par with Herc. The one skill Alter doesn't share with his Lancer counterpart is Frenzy of Spirits, which at first glance seems like a weird skill to put on Berserker. This type of skill is more suited for a support like Waver or Martha, but surprisingly it does work just as well on Ku and contributes to his strong survivability. When you consider that Berserkers in particular are extremely susceptible to melting from crits, a 50% crit rate debuff for all enemies is incredibly strong. In other words, fuck Chimeras. The 20% attack debuff also synergizes well with your defense buff from Protection from Arrows, granting you a potent 34% reduction in damage from all enemies, 64% when you combine it with your Noble Phantasm. You should definitely max Protection from Arrows first because the cooldown reduction is just incredibly important, followed by Frenzy of Spirits and then Battle Continuation. You might be wondering why Jalter doesn't have an attack buff skill despite being a berserker, but that's what his Noble Phantasm is for. On top of dealing strong damage to an enemy, it gives Ku at least a 30% attack and defense buff for one turn, which makes it incredibly strong for leading off a Buster Brave Chain with. Ku Alter's skills give him insane survivability, and he doesn't have to sacrifice damage for it thanks to his incredible attack stat and the buff from his Noble Phantasm. It also goes without saying that as a Buster Servant, he's in the ideal position in terms of receiving quality support options. If you're wondering if Ku Alter has a weakness, it's his Noble Phantasm gain. While he does have higher Noble Phantasm gain than most Berserkers, it's still very bad compared to most servants overall, and because his attack buff is tied to his Noble Phantasm, it makes his damage inconsistent if you can't Noble Phantasm often enough. But then again, that's why Waver exists. Speaking of which, even though Ku Alter is fully capable of being just as strong as solo or as Herc is, team comp is important. The aforementioned Waver is your best support option since all of his skills synergize perfectly with Ku's. He makes up for the lack of Ku Alter's Noble Phantasm gain, he gives him a strong attack buff outside of his Noble Phantasm, and a defense buff that complements his own protection from arrows buff. Other than Waver, the traditional supports, Helena, Hans, Nero Bride, Nightingale, Caesar, David, Media Lily, and Tamamo go very well with him. Defensive servants with taunts also pair very nicely, considering the nature of Ku's evasion skill. So Mosh, George, and especially Leonidas are very good since he can provide 2 taunts and a Buster buff post Strengthening Quest. But Ku Alter's survival skills are so good you can also just skip supports entirely and pair him with a strong Buster servant like Gil, Rama, Herc, Karna, etc. for a more fragile but powerful offensive team to blitz through weaker enemies. Ku Alter's Bondcraft Essence is Lone Man's War. It increases his Noble Phantasm strength by 30% and gives him a one-time Guts. This is a ridiculously overpowered craft essence, very reminiscent to Herc's. It bolsters your Noble Phantasm damage considerably, and it gives you an extra life, making you much stronger both offensively and defensively. If you get this craft essence, then use it on him. Otherwise, Limited Zero and Halloween Princess are your best damage options. Kaleidoscope is good if you want a Noble Phantasm right away, for example, if you plan on switching him in or you have him as a sweeper. Prisma Cosmos is a good option if you want more reliable Noble Phantasm gain, and although it's not out yet, Volume Hydragum will be out soon, and this is your best defensive pick for Craft Essence on Ku Alter, as it grants him invincibility for 3 hits. Overall, I don't know what else to say about Ku Alter other than scream from a mountaintop about how OP he is. He has all the benefits of a Berserker without any drawbacks. He has insane damage potential, matched with very strong defensive skills. His Noble Phantasm gain is really his only Achilles heel, but it's virtually neutralized if you can pair him with one decent support. And he benefits more from the Buster meta and the Age of Merlin and Waver than probably any other servant aside from Jalter Alter, so he gets an S rating from me. Honestly, I was going to give him an A+, but when you compare him to servants like Gil, who I did give an A+ to, he plays notably better than them and has stronger synergy with supports thanks to his skills, and stronger synergy with other Buster servants because of his deck. I will say this, if you're not sure who to roll for between Ku Alter and Jalter Alter, I highly recommend Jalter Alter, not because I think she's significantly better, but because she's limited, whereas Ku Alter will always be available in the story gacha, so there is always the possibility of being spooked by him, whereas Jalter is much more rare. And those are my thoughts on Ku Alter. Probably didn't say anything you guys don't already know, given all the hype surrounding him, but good luck to everyone rolling him. If you do manage to roll him or you plan to roll him, do let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't already, please do check out these spotlights, linked both on screen right now and in the description for the other America servants. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over at our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter. And I will see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.